elected.
Michelle Malkin, thanks for joining us. Agent Peter Strzok pulled from the Mueller probe after sending anti-Trump and pro-Clinton text messages. Turns out this agent was involved in both the Russia collusion and Clinton email probes.
That's right. House Intel Chair Devin Nunes outraged, saying, quote, by hiding from Congress and from the American people, documented political bias by a key FBI head investigator for both the Russia collusion probe and the Clinton email investigation, the FBI and DOJ engaged in a willful attempt to thwart Congress's constitutional oversight responsibility.
Here to react is Fox News anchor Greg Jarrett. Let's talk about this. I mean, does this really undermine this new news, the entire Mueller investigation?
It does. Look, it had already, its credibility called into question as, corrupt and prejudiced. Mueller stacked it with Democratic donors. Mueller himself, under the statute, is required to disqualify himself. He didn't do it. So is Rod Rosenstein, the Deputy Attorney General. He's both prosecutor and a witness in the case. Both of them should be nowhere near this investigation, and yet they're intimately involved in it. And now we know, an FBI agent was sending out anti-Trump emails. That guy should have never been on this investigation. He should never have been involved in the Hillary Clinton investigation. And in fact,
he was at the Clinton interview.
Yeah, he did the interview. And he was also involved in Comey's drafting of the statement of exoneration of Hillary Clinton months before she ever sat down for the interview. So it was a setup, and it was probably, in my judgment, obstruction of justice in the Hillary Clinton case by Comey and perhaps others. They were interfering in the due administration of an investigation.
Well, wait a second. James Comey's on Instagram and Twitter talking about truth, justice, and the American way.
He doesn't know anything about any of those subjects. He is the most insufferable, self-righteous person I think I've ever covered. And he's also a guy who appears to have committed a myriad of crimes. He stole government crimes. He stole government documents and conveyed them to somebody who wasn't authorized to see him. That's a violation of a
go-between who then leaked
when he was
right,
the leaker.
and then leaked it to the media. That, as I look at the statute, is a crime.
So this Peter Strzok, FBI agent who was dismissed 6 months ago, we knew that he was dismissed from the Mueller probe. We didn't know why. Why has it been so difficult to find out the real there?
Because the Department of Justice, the FBI, and to some extent Robert Mueller, have been trying to hide it from Congress. And that constitutes contempt. Chairman Nunes of the House Intelligence Committee needs to pursue the contempt citation, have Congress vote on it, refer it to a federal judge for prosecution against Rod Rosenstein and Christopher Wray, the FBI director, because they're the ones who've been obstructing it. And I guarantee you this FBI agent, Peter Strzok, when he's put under oath, will invoke the Fifth.
We've got a minute. Let's talk about the impact of Flynn pleading guilty to lying to the FBI. A crime, as you know, obviously, but we had Alan Dershowitz on yesterday saying that everyone's hyperventilating about this, but he thinks it actually shows that the Mueller probe is sort of, hitting, if not a dead end, that it's not going anywhere in terms of obstruction, because that's the best he has, is lying to the FBI. Important, but that it's not going to lead to obstruction.
What's interesting...
Or collusion.
Flynn, well, there's no such thing as collusion in a political campaign. It's not a crime. It's only an antitrust law. Look, Flynn lied about something that's not a crime. It's not a crime to talk to the Russians in a transition period before inauguration. Every incoming president and his transition team does it. I've heard some talking heads say, oh, it's a violation of the Logan Act. That's preposterous. First of all, the Logan Act has been regarded by the federal courts as unconstitutional. And even if it's a valid law, there was no violation of the Logan Act because Flynn and the transition team were not acting as private individuals under the act, but as a representative of the incoming president.
We appreciate you bringing these facts to the table this morning.
We're out of time. There's a new Trump tweet. I'm going to ask you.
All right, amid the sexual misconduct scandal sweeping the nation, growing outrage over a still-secret shush fund that uses your money to silence the victims of sexual harassment by members of Congress. But that is just one example of swampy politicians rigging the system on your dime. The special privileges of Congress is this week's Swamp Watch. The Congressional Shush Fund, fast becoming a major national scandal, has spent more than $17 million in taxpayer dollars to settle workplace disputes on Capitol Hill since 1997. This money falls under the previously obscure Congressional Office of Compliance. Compliance with what? The sexual incontinence of dirty old men who happen to have got themselves elected to Congress? In a 2014 case, Texas Republican Blake Farenthold spent $84,000 from the fund to pay off Lauren Green, his communications director, who accused him of sexual harassment, claiming another aide told her Farenthold had sexual fantasies about her. When Green complained, she was fired. Her subsequent lawsuit got her that $84,000 taxpayer-funded settlement. This shush fund is just one way lawmakers cover up their abuse. Democrat John Conyers is reported to have paid off one of his former employees alleging sexual misconduct out of his office budget, like an expense claim. You know, staplers, photocopying, assaulting the staff and covering it up. That shush fund looks like it could be just the tip of the iceberg. But these aren't the only examples of the swamp putting itself first. We elect members of Congress to represent our interests, but they spend most of their time and our money on their interests. That's not some populist slogan. It's literally how they spend their time. A leaked PowerPoint slide from the 2013 Congressional Orientation for Newly Elected Democrats recommended that every member spend 4 hours a day in call time. That's swamp speak for raising money. An additional hour is for strategic outreach, i.e. sucking up to big donors. And then, after all that begging for money, there's an hour for, get this, recharge time. All told, the official recommendation is that lawmakers spend less than half their day doing actual congressional work, and most of it raising money for their stupid campaigns to get re-elected so they can come back and do it all over again. That's their real priority. On his way out of Washington, former Democratic Representative Steve Israel wrote a searing account of his time in Congress, explaining how he was taught that rule number one was to get re-elected. He wrote, "A fundraising consultant advised that if I didn't raise at least $10,000 a week, I wouldn't be back. By law, members of Congress can't make fundraising calls from their offices, so both parties have set up call centers a few blocks away. They call it dialing for dollars. Here's a revolutionary idea. Why don't they try working for constituents? If they did, they might actually deserve some of their perks and privileges. Did you know that members of Congress get free reserve parking at DC airports, plus a dedicated call desk with major airlines, and the ability to reserve seats on multiple flights but only pay for the flight they board? Then look at their health benefits. Senators and representatives are required by law to buy insurance through an Affordable Care Act exchange, but they get a federal subsidy amounting to 72% of their premiums. The point of taxpayer subsidies is to help people on low incomes. Good luck trying to find a low-income member of Congress. A rank-and-file congressional salary is $174,000 a year, nearly $120,000 more than the average American household. That puts every member of Congress in the top 5% of incomes. Members also get an annual office allowance, with an average of over $1.2 million for a House member and over $3 million for a senator. Theoretically, those expenses are available for public scrutiny. But look at one of the expense reports. They're so vague you could hide anything in them, like payments to silence sexual harassment victims. Transparency never looks so murky. Now, you might think the DC gravy train stops when members of Congress leave office. Come on, this is the swamp we're talking about. Depending on age and length of service, members can receive a lifelong pension of 80% of their salary. That adds up to $139,200 in annual taxpayer-funded retirement benefits for life. Compare that to the average retirement income for Americans 65 and over, $31,700 a year. And finally, check out this ridiculous perk: the right to smoke in their offices. The District of Columbia has banned smoking in public spaces, but Congress gets around it by decreeing that the district's laws and regulations do not apply to the functions or property of the federal government. How fitting that our swampy lawmakers can just decide that local laws apply to everyone but themselves. Former Speaker John Boehner certainly took advantage. He was an infamous Capitol Hill smoker. When his successor moved into his office, Paul Ryan had to spend taxpayer dollars on an ozone machine to, quote, detoxify the environment. Detoxify the environment. I think that applies to more than just the stench of John Boehner's office, don't you?